So contestants of the new TV show Squid Game: The Challenge, which is a real-life version of the fictional Netflix show, are suing the producers over injuries. Two contestants of the new Netflix series Squid Game: The Challenge are threatening legal action over alleged injuries they said they suffered while filming, including hypothermia. The health concerns were mainly centered around the first challenge of the game show, Red Light, Green Light, where contestants race to finish the line without being detected by a motion-spotting robot. It requires players to run quickly when the giant robot doll was not looking, and then abruptly stop and stand still when the robot faces toward them. If you've seen Squid Game, you know all about it, but if you haven't, the first challenge is you have 10 minutes to run from one side of the arena to the other. However, this giant robot then says red light and you have to stop perfectly still. You can only continue when the robot turns away and says green light. Now, even though the game is 10 minutes long, in reality, when participants were holding still, they had to stay like that for up to an hour at a time. No idea why. I mean, maybe something to do with the camera angles. I don't know. So instead of freezing your position for a few seconds, people had to stay in whatever position for hours throughout the day, and apparently the whole shoot was between 7 and 8 hours. Now, there's a clip of a contestant who was crouching, and she had to hold a position, yet she gave up. And I think viewers were like, oh, she wimped out. She couldn't crouch for, what, 10 seconds? Well, actually, she had to stay in that position for nearly an hour. The arena was also freezing cold, and no idea why it had to be so cold. Like, that has nothing to do with the games. David Slade, an accident specialist with Express Solicitors, said at least 2 contestants felt unwell after standing or crouching motionless for hours in cold temperatures, which led to one contestant suffering from hypothermia. There was also a concern about the iconic green uniform, which one contestant alleged did not properly protect her from the chilly conditions, Slade added. From what we've been told, they pushed the boundaries of safety in the name of entertainment, he said in a statement. Production companies need to ensure that health and safety standards on their shows don't leave people at risk or harm. Now, obviously, the TV exec said, well, they did nothing wrong, no surprise, and that they take health and safety seriously. Now, another executive, Stephen Lambert, said they knew what they signed up for and it wouldn't be a cakewalk. We're giving away the largest prize in TV competition history, Lambert said. The challenge contestants faced moments that were quite tough, but not nearly as difficult as many other reality competition shows in the US, like Popular Survivor or MTV's The Challenge, which had seen contestants break bones and have to endure incredibly strenuous competitions. This is no harder than one of those, and in lots of shows you have people sometimes treated for mild complaints, which is what happened in that particular game, Lambert said. Yeah, but firstly, people weren't complaining about the actual tasks, it was the conditions in which they were treated. So it's not like, I don't know, going on total wipeout and you hurt yourself on a challenge. It's the fact that people got fucking hypothermia and weren't given appropriate clothing for the temperature. Maybe, I don't know, filming in a warmer location or some heating wouldn't go amiss. I mean, it wouldn't take anything away from the challenges. One of the executives also said that the anti-capitalist message was only a small part of the original fictional show. For us, the anti-capitalist allegory is only one very small part of the game, Tim Harcourt, an executive producer of the reality show Squid Game: The Challenge, told TV Guide. This is mad. The whole point of the show is to show the exploitation of poor conditions under capitalism. And it's just so ironic that TV execs are like, well, they can win loads of money and they know what they got themselves into. That's the exact same reasoning the group of rich people who made the games in the fictional show used to justify their actions. Now, in the second episode, after learning that you'll be killed in the games, contestants were giving a vote on whether to stay or leave, which they chose to leave by a very thin margin. But many people chose to come back to the games after knowing how poor and miserable their lives were. They were willing to die in order to win money to escape poverty. There's even a scene where a North Korean defector says that South Korea isn't much better, which is a nod to the exploitative capitalist system and insane work culture South Koreans face. Squid Game: The Challenge isn't just a game show of a fictional TV series. It's actually a direct example of what Squid Game was trying to critique. Now, I watched 2 episodes, I was intrigued, but I was really put off by some of the segments when you get to know the participants. Some of them were saying they needed the money to support their family. I mean, this show is exploiting people's real needs, seemingly unaware that the show they are replicating is an example of the fictional show's message. This is peak capitalist realism. So capitalism is very clever in molding itself in order to stay alive. It comes to the point that the system is almost mocking us, that a game show can exist which behaves in almost an identical way to the fictional show. Part of what Mark Fisher was trying to say in his book, Capitalist Realism, is how capitalism can even respond to anti-capitalism and then make itself relevant through it, in this context, content or entertainment. Now, a good example of this is the Black Mirror episode 15 Million Merits. The characters are in a dystopian world where they live in a very restricted way of life. All day, they will give up their time by seemingly powering either their own energy or someone else's through riding an exercise bike of some sorts. Now, it's compulsory. They all have to do it to hit a certain target. Then they're rewarded with credits, which can be used to purchase TV or movies, which are very limited. Now, the only way to escape their life is to become a star of one of these shows. This happens to one of the characters who thinks she's auditioning for a singing competition only to be forced into porn. Towards the end, the main character takes drastic action. He manages to get himself an audience and threatens to cut his own throat, using this as leverage to try and save his friend. It's at the end of the show, which is pretty depressing, where we see the main character giving a message that sounds kind of revolutionary, that maybe they managed to escape and bring down the system, when in the end, that revolutionary message actually becomes a piece of content in of itself, and the current system remains intact. And I thought this was a very good example, because instead of taking lessons from the message in the original Squid Games, Netflix manages to make it into a capitalist content, and this is happening all around us. I don't know if you remember, but one of the Pepsi adverts, there was one where it showed people taken to the streets, protesters versus the police. Then at the end of the day, they all get along because someone cracks open a can of Pepsi. It's a really gross exploitation of the very real resentment of the way life is. And the producers of the ads, they know this, which is why the whole premise of the ad is about protesting and social movements. You can see it with greenwashing, when huge companies like Amazon talk about tackling climate change, but it's done in a way where they manage to lecture us, the consumers, on what we should do to keep our carbon footprint down, whilst it's the big corporations that contribute to 80% of the pollution and do nothing to change their behaviour. Now, I don't usually talk about pop culture, but I thought this was a really interesting point to make on how we are essentially being gaslit by capitalism and its propensity to somehow hang on and reinvent itself. And it's important that we look out for this and understand that shows like Squid Game, the reality show that is, reinforces neoliberal individualism. And even when the original show's core message is calling this out, we still somehow manage to end up with content that completely misses the point and is even produced on the very same streaming platform as the anti-capitalist original. You almost couldn't make this up.